can feel my body hold against the concrete, but I can't seem to get enough. My mind is fixed on what it wants. I just let you beat me, look at me deceiving. Let you get the best of me, in bed with my worst enemy. This is a no-go, I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone, back up and get me home. This is a no-go, I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone, back up and get me home. So put your hand in mine, follow me, let me waste your time. Set up feet, do some stupid shit. Take a seat, let me waste your time. Slow beats up a tower.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Lawyer's Den on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Pellavine. I'll be one of the speakers today for this great show that we're going to be going through because it involves Supreme Court of the United States cases. And this one we're going to look at deals with firing government employees. And there's actually a whole series of these cases. One of the ones we're going to look at today will be Trump versus the Federation of Government Employees. To what extent does the executive branch have the right to fire government employees without cause, which is a very interesting case. Then there was another one, McMahon versus New York Department and the Department of Education. Can he wipe out the Department of Education? And then the third one is the National Treasurers Employees Union versus Vaughn. That's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Can you just wipe out these? Well, with that, we're going to bring in another attorney, a gentleman who graduated law school from the University of Miami, which I now know that Trump's grandchild will be attending. We'll bring in Peter Bennett. So Peter, I don't know if you follow these cases, but they're really very important cases because it's almost like this is never done before. You can't fire government employees. Once they're hired, you cannot fire them except for cause. Or can you? Well, what are your thoughts?
Well, that would be news to me if you can't fire any employees to a point. But so there were, as you said, a series of cases. I wasn't sure which one you were going to address, but I pulled up some of them in that series, 2 out of the 3, I guess. And they involved, I always start with the background, by the way. So the one case was nonprofit organizations that were suing, and they were basically saying probationary employees in the U.S. Department of Defense, Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Energy and Interior, none of them could be fired. And one argument would seem legitimate to a point, I have to admit, is that they argue that they were fired for cause because the Trump administration said that basically we don't want any of them, and we're firing for cause. Of course, the other argument might be, well, the cause is that none of them could do the job that we need to be done. But so that was one case. And back in, I think in March or April, the Supreme Court blocked a judge who said, no, you can't fire them. So that was one of these cases. Another case involved firing 1,400 education employees. Again, sort of same scenario. A local district judge, unelected, decides that you can't fire them. And so that's what we were basically looking at in terms of the Supreme Court looking at it. But since then, in the last roughly 2 weeks, there's been a decision by the Supreme Court in which they said, yes, you can fire Fed employees. And that seems to be the direction that they're going. Usually on Lawyer's Den, a lot of times we're talking about cases that are coming up for the Supreme Court, I would point out. And so we're kind of judging where they're going. But this one has been decided. So we can look at the rationale briefly, why the Supreme Court was thinking like they are. Nick, what do you think?
Well, you know, the thing is, in private industry, which I work in, you can get fired with or without cause. I mean, so everywhere you go, if you're in private industry, your job's on the line almost every day. And not only that, if you're working with clients, your clients can fire you or hire you. So once you meet with a client, they decide they don't like you with or without cause and go somewhere else. Where do government employees have the audacity that they get a job secure for life? I don't get it. When no one else gets those benefits, where the government employees get pension benefits and the rest of us don't. 100% almost of federal government employees have pension benefits, 80% of what I call state employees. So now they have a right to have a job. Now there are certain jobs that are protected, such as the Federal Reserve and even the Supreme Court of the United States. You cannot fire the Supreme Court. They actually have tenure for life. But a regular administrative employee can't be fired. You cannot be serious. But that had been the rule in Washington. And I guess that's the reason we have such a bloated government. You keep hiring people, and their accountability can be pretty low because they can't be fired. So I tend to agree with Justice Roberts. His decision was, hey, look, they're working for the executive branch. They're representing the executive branch. If the executive branch wants to get rid of them, you can get rid of them. But and it looks like the whole line of cases we're looking at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Department of Education. Now there's a whole nother thing is should they get rid of these departments or not? That's a whole different issue. But him having the right to fire them, I think, is pretty clear.
Right. These cases really outline them. What's interesting about these cases, not only that what they ruled, because I would have expected this probably as the ruling. If we had said it in advance, we've been pretty good at calling where the Supreme Court was going. But the thing is, it really outlines a lot of what's been going on with the judiciary and the executive in the last few months, and also back to the first Trump administration. So and it's changing. And so there are likely three reasons why, again, that outline what's the overview of what's happening in the judiciary on these executive cases. So the first is more specific to the case, that you have to say, who is going to decide who gets fired? Is it going to be a judge? And is that the job of the judicial system? Or is it the job of the executive? So that one was, basically the judiciary is not equipped to deal with these cases, which is another reason, second reason. But another reason is the Supreme Court now has ruled that judges should only make decisions that affect the parties before them. So this was traditionally how justice was done in the judiciary. In other words, you couldn't just go to one judge where you could forum shop, which is part of the problem. In this case, at least one case is to a San Francisco judge who you knew what he was going to say before he even ruled. Some of these cases have patterns of you could tell what they're going to say. That's not how the judiciary is supposed to work. They're supposed to evaluate. That's right, 700 district judges, and they're elected, and they're not elected. They're appointed or get into office another way in general. So the judiciary is not built around basically making decisions of this nature, and they have plenty on their plate. They're overloaded now. In general, the judiciary, with criminal cases, with serious cases, they're supposed to be the referee and make the calls. They're not supposed to be, deciding which team wins or loses outright, and especially if they have a predisposition. And the third one is, if you look at just the traditional role of the president, as footnote, by the way, there have been 50 injunctions now against the Trump administration in this term in 6 months. Biden had 14. In the last century, there were 27 injunctions against the president. So it's gotten kind of out of hand unless you want the judges to rule. And don't be too happy if you do want the judges to rule because you like these cases, because there was also the case where the Supreme Court ruled that in a Texas case where the local judge said, well, we don't like an abortion drug. And the liberal judge, I think it was Roberts or Sotomayor, said, oh, this is horrible. It was Kagan. Kagan said, oh, this is terrible. We should never allow a district judge to create national policy. But it's not about the issue. So the final point is, if you look at the executive branch, they're supposed to execute the laws of the government. So if you look at AI, it says the executive branch of a government is the part responsible for enforcing laws and carrying out the functions of state. It is typically headed by the chief executive, and it includes departments and agencies that administer and manage the day-to-day operations of the government. This does not sound like the judiciary's job, and hiring and firing employees isn't part of And if it isn't part of the day-to-day function of an executive branch, I have no idea where it belongs.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's in the Constitution, Section 1 of Article 2, the executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States. It doesn't say it's vested in the Congress. It doesn't say it's vested in the judiciary. It's vested in the President of the United States. So like it or not, the President is the one that gets to make these decisions as to who goes and who stays, as opposed to the individual says, hey, I got a government job and I'll be there for life. All I have to do is not show up to work. In other words, so I won't be dismissed.
And you know what? A lot of government employees will be there for life, but it's up to the executive to decide who will be there for life and who won't, because again, that's what the executive does. They carry out the laws. They control the operations of the government. Yeah.
And so like I said, when I look through the opinion, I tend to lean toward Justice Roberts. I did see the dissents, but I don't think the dissents like, Sotomayor, Kagan, Jackson, I don't think they have any real meat in those potatoes. One of them did discuss the Humphreys case, which is a longstanding precedence of not firing employees. But then again, that might be what's wrong with the United States. This may be the reason why we have a bloated bureaucracy and bloated debt, 36 trillion in debt, because people can go into the government and get a job and frankly be a government employee for life. Whether or not they're producing things that are valuable is a whole different cat. So I tend to agree with you.
True, except for I would add, I do not stand for that 36 trillion. As we've discussed from Economics Monday and on Wall Street Hackers, which is coming up next in a few minutes, the real debt in the United States is approximately 125 trillion. That is more money than the entire U.S. stock market, U.S. bond market, all privately held real estate, and all publicly held real estate, commercial real estate. So the reason is because we have unfunded liabilities that GAAP, general accounting principles, would definitely include in any business, in any household. I mean, they're real obligations, and they're coming up in 7, 8, and 10 years. And these are massive promises that have been made that are unfunded. And this is why the United States has to tighten their belt, has to get the bureaucracy down. But these are drops in the bucket. 127 trillion is so much money that even if the Trump administration does a lot of things right, which they are in many ways financially, the new, tariffs are now generating new revenue. Maybe they can make, they can deregulate, they can try to grow. But this is so much money. It's accumulated over 50 years. Republican and Democrat administrations have raised it. And every day you'll hear 36 trillion going to 37 trillion on the news. And nobody mentions that it's really 125 trillion. That will be the subject of Wall Street Hackers, because we're going to get into what is the real truth and how important it is to base your investing on, among other things. So what do you think, Nick? We're going to have to wrap it up soon.
Yeah, I think you have a couple more fans. I collected a couple more fans for Wall Street Hackers. I was telling all about you and your show, and they gave me their email address so I can specifically give them the Hacker Show once it's produced. So Victor and Hugo will both be watching with bated breath the Wall Street Hacker Show, which is one of the best shows on the Pod TV network. But other than that, like I said, it looks like there's a new sheriff in town. And if the sheriff wants to get rid of the deputies, sheriff has the right to get rid of the deputies.
And that's the job of the sheriff.
The job of the sheriff. You don't like the sheriff, get a new sheriff. But
no. Well, that's true too. You can get a new sheriff.
Yeah, but if not,
the sheriff is the one who decides whose deputies are, because they have to work with them.
This is the sheriff you voted for. Stuff. And we'll see you next time on Lawyers Den. Until then,
Lawyers Den.
Make sure you have if you work for the government, make sure you have your resume out there. Take care.
But that's not funny.
I can feel my body hold against the concrete, but I can't seem to get enough. My mind is fixed on what it wants. I just let you beat me, look at me deceiving, let you get the best of me, in bed with my worst enemy. This is a no-go, I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone, back up and get me home. This is a no-go, I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone, back up
Welcome to Wall Street Hackers on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Pallavito. I'll be one of your hosts for today's show. And if Victor and Hugo are watching, just remember you've got to open up your accounts, with Schwab, TD Ameritrade, Wells Fargo. But if you're not playing the stock game, you're not learning how stocks work. And you do need to do that. And of course, tune in every week to Wall Street Hackers. And with that, we do have a very important person who heads up Wall Street Hackers, who's actually been in New York City working on the trading desk for over 17 years. He also has a degree in economics from UCLA, a law degree from the University of Miami, and a master's in business administration from NYU. So heading up the Hackers to give us some insights, including MPLX. I keep talking, people don't know what that is. We'll bring in none other than Peter Bennett. Peter, welcome to your own show. I collected a couple more fans for you, but collecting fans for you is actually one of the easiest things in the world to do.
Yeah, we already are piling up quite a lot of fans. We had over 6,000 likes on TikTok alone, and we're in many distribution channels. A couple of quick things. One, I actually was not on the trading desk. I did mention that. I worked for Citibank Investment Bank, but we were supporting the people on the trading desk. So a lot of my knowledge, even though I worked on Wall Street for 17 years, but a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it was self-developed. I just kept reading and being interested in investing and self-taught myself. Although, yeah, obviously I had the law degree, the MBA, and a background, but I always had an interest in investing. And you're right. The other thing is, you said you have to play the game. If you were playing a game like Monopoly or Risk or whatever game you want to play today in a video game, you have to start playing to learn. So, but you have to play small initially. So welcome, audience, to Wall Street Hackers, July 29th, 2025. You can catch a new episode at roughly starting at 6:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesdays, most Tuesdays. And that follows Lawyer's Den, which goes on about 6 o'clock. But depending on the length of Lawyer's Den, about 15 minutes, and we go into Wall Street Hackers. So kind of paired shows. So the markets. This week's panel question, which will come up later, is how important is the real truth? And this relates to a lot of different topics, but investing is one of them, as well as personal living and politics and everything. So we'll be getting into that towards the tail end of the show. But in terms of real truth in investing, is really critical because you have to dig down. There's so much information out there in the information age. And I think it was Ray Dalio, who I'm going to quote later, I'm not sure, said you have to really do a lot of work to get to the truth. And I think he said that about Bridgewater Associates, which is and has been one of the most successful hedge funds and financial institutions. But it really takes work. A lot of times it's like you can read different opinions. And so you have to really dig down. And maybe next week I'll go into, and maybe I'll use MPLX, but I'll go into how I dig down to get to the real fundamentals. And one last thing about that is my first mentor, long-term mentor on Wall Street, Dick York, who taught me a lot. He moved on to work at Discover. That was with a company called Dean Witter back then, which got bought up by JP Morgan. But he taught me always go to the initial source, to the best source. In other words, where the information is coming from. So one place you look is the actual financial statements and the actual presentations of a company. And you want to, in politics, look at the quotes of the people themselves and what they actually say, not secondhand or third-hand information. But we'll get into that later a bit. So here's the point about the real truth of what's happening in the markets. And this is my truth for sure. And that's that every day or almost every week you're hearing, quote, record highs, right? It's like, oh, I need to get in this game. It's a record high. Everybody might get that impression the way it's said, but nobody mentions the real truth behind those, quote, record highs. So here's the numbers, and math is clearly a truth. The S&P 500, which is the SPY, was at 635 this morning during the opening, during the open trading. But in February, it was at 613. And in November 24, it was at 603. So we're talking about 613, 635, 603. The QQQ, which is the NASDAQ 100, at 568 this morning, June 19th at 559, 12/16/24, 538. So what does that mean? What am I saying? What I'm saying is that we're talking about a 5.3% SPY gain in 8 months and 5.5% Q gain in about eight months. Now take off inflation, because you're not making any money if you're not beating inflation. And inflation, let's call it a 2.9%, which is a reasonable estimate. It could be higher, by the way, because the government doesn't actually necessarily report that number accurately either, but let's call it 2.9. So what are you left with? You're left with a very small fraction. So those record highs, quote, may not be as exciting in reality. And this is especially true for a couple of reasons. Number one, October is the most volatile month in stock market. And I looked this up today. I wasn't sure, but I knew October wasn't too good a month. November is the second most volatile month, and August is the fifth most volatile. So we're heading into the fall and late summer now. And one bad day, maybe 2 bad days, sure, 3 days, and certainly one bad week could wipe out 8 months of progress. And it could easily happen. I wouldn't be surprised. And that's because the market itself is very overvalued in terms of historical norms. So the other reason that I think that there's too much hype on these, quote, record highs is that Wall Street hackers, and this is our opinion, but I'll tell you why I believe it, I think it's pretty solid, is that our 10-year forecast for gains in the general market, the average gains, are going to be very small. I hate to give the bad news, but that's the fact. When you listen to the news, again, you can deal with reality, or you can deal with, what you want, like a quote that I'm going to give by Ray Dalio in a minute or so. But here are the 3 main reasons why I think that there's going to be low returns for the next 10 years. And that's not to be said everybody's going to get returns. We hope to get much higher returns. So number one, regression to the mean. So that basically means when you do really well, like the market has been doing for the last decades, it tends to not do as well because the valuations are high and you return to the norm. Number two, the monumental debt in the U.S. We just discussed this on Wall Street Hackers when Nick, who is almost always accurate, said 36 trillion in U.S. debt. But the fact is it's 125 trillion, and that is the truth, give or take. The reason is because the U.S. government has all these gigantic, tremendous obligations that bring it up to probably about 125 trillion, because on a GAAP basis, generally accepted accounting principles, you would definitely have to count the money they owe for Social Security and Medicare. But those are, quote, off the books. So nobody's mentioning the fact that these are piling up, and they're already causing, even now, problems like the interest is already higher than the U.S. defense budget. But it's going to get worse because it's just compounding all this massive debt that, as I mentioned on the last show, those 125 trillion is more than the entire U.S. stock market, bond market, and U.S. privately held in real estate and commercial real estate. So you're basically talking about that's more than everything in the United States, all the value there, based most of it, or all of it, slightly more. But, and you're saying, okay, I'll just go worldwide. I'll go to Europe. I'll go to Russia. I'll go to, Asia. I'll go, to South America. But I've looked at these continents and countries, and their situations are very similar. They have massively underfunded retirement plans, and they have promises of mostly free healthcare for aging demographics, and they haven't put the money aside. So you're not going to find shelter in other countries, and you're going to have to be really careful about the truth in the United States, because this is going to lead to money printing, because that's the only way you're going to get out of this. And that's going to likely cause stagflation. And that's in spite of any positive things like the trade deals President Trump just did last week, which we'll cover next week. Any positive things that might bring in revenue to the United States, or anything else any other country does. These problems have been piling up for 50 years plus, whatever. And, now all of a sudden we're getting to the end of this road for maybe 7 more years, and it's starting to compound. So there's major problems. That's not going to help the market. But let's say you just missed my theories on debt and regression. Here's what some major financial institutions have forecast for the next 10 years. JP Morgan, and I'm not sure, by the way, if these are after or before inflation, because I didn't have time to look that up, but it tells the same story. Because remember, these institutions have every reason to be optimistic about the returns. So even if they said after inflation progress, that doesn't mean that will actually be the results. They want it to be optimistic. So maybe they're over optimistic. But let's call it even and say maybe they're right. JP Morgan, 5.7% annualized returns for the next 10 years. Charles Schwab, 6% annualized returns for 10 years on U.S. large caps. Goldman Sachs, 3% annualized returns for 10 years. So whether or not this is before or after inflation, this is going to be a little bit of tough sledding, and it's going to be an environment where it's going to be more difficult than other decades to build wealth, and especially to build wealth against inflation. So the bottom line is this is why Wall Street Hackers focuses on investments we think can do much better. One, we focus on investments that generate high income, and that has historically been the way to go. We have 200 roughly years of studies that show far outperformance on dividend stocks, especially dividend growth stocks and higher dividend paying stocks, but you have to be very selective. Number two, we look for safer sectors that should do well in any macro environment. And three, we look for companies with very strong cash flows. I'm a big believer in cash flows because those cash flows can be used for reinvestment, to support dividends, to grow dividends, support higher income, and to defend the balance sheet. So the only other thing I'd mention now is those tariff deals were tremendous. The media said, tariffs are going to crush the economy. Some were saying, recession by July, and it's going to be terrible for the United States. People sold off the dollar because the tariff deals were going to crush us. And back just months ago when they were coming out and whatever, I was saying, no, why would you sell the U.S. dollar when this is going to strengthen the U.S. dollar relative to other countries that have been benefiting from unfair trade? But that's a topic for another week because we only have about half an hour on the show and I can never keep it. There's so much to say. Okay, quote of the week. This comes from the famous investor Ray Dalio, who ran Bridgewater Associates for years. If you're like most people, the idea of facing the unvarnished truth makes you anxious. This is true. To get over that, you need to understand intellectually why untruths are scarier than truths. And then through practice, get accustomed to living with them. And I'm editing this, by the way. As scary as the truth may turn out to be, you will be better off knowing the truth in the long run because it will allow you to seek the most appropriate actions. So, yeah, you can stick your head in the sand or say, I don't like the truth, I won't look at it. But the truth is the way to go, in my opinion. Most interesting story of the week. It's an amazing story in terms of reality. So, and not financial. So I will just read this. With the incredibly rapid advancements in AI, artificial intelligence, it's getting harder to tell what, or more precisely, who is real these days. Sexy influencer Mia Zelu made headlines earlier this month after her stunning snaps from Wimbledon sent fans into a frenzy. The blonde beauty boasts 168,000 followers on Instagram, but there's just one problem. She isn't real. Mia is an artificial bot designed by an unidentified software developer. We don't even know who developed her. And she's just one of a growing species. AI influencers are cropping up on social media in droves, duping users into believing they're actually humans with their incredibly lifelike images and videos. So looking at the glass quarter full, half full, I think this is one possible good side of this is people are going to start really seeking out reality more and more. They're going to start questioning what is real and what's not and being more skeptical, whether it's news or AI or whatever. So maybe people will get smarter in a way. But 168,000 fans, not bad. Keep it up, man. So, quick segment, why President Trump or someone in the White House, I'll add, should give me a quick call segment. I wrote a 30-page report called The Pathway to Fiscal Stability. It was reviewed but not endorsed by a former controller of the currency, and he didn't make that many changes. And many of the ideas were adopted in the big, beautiful bill. I said, I don't know. I did send it out to about 23 parties, the White House, and a lot of key senators and people in the House. I don't know if they responded or not because they never let me know. But some of the ideas were definitely in the big, beautiful bill and might have gotten in there anyway. But there were a lot that were not even incorporated in there. And these are really important ideas. The U.S. debt being $125 trillion, this is the time for action. And that report contains a lot of actionable ideas and probably could save, and I'm sure could save a lot more money than even DOGE's, efforts, which was supposed to save $2 trillion, which isn't even enough, but only really wound up with maybe $200 billion, less than that. So somebody should give me a call. Okay, back to reality for you guys, for the investment public. Dividend stock of the week. First disclaimers, Wall Street Hackers is for entertainment only. These are only our opinions. There's no guarantees on any of our suggestions. That's because nobody can guarantee anything just about maybe a CD or treasury, but that's only if you hold it to maturity. Consult your financial advisor. So this week we get back to my favorite sector, which is energy. And there's a good reason why it is, because it has historically outperformed, not always, but a lot of times. And it's also a safe sector because people need to heat their homes and drive their cars. So we go to CNQ, Canadian Natural Resources, for a small allocation. Why a small allocation? I love energy, but the thing is, MPLX is incredibly perfect, and I'm looking every week for something that matches it. I search MPLX and other things. I look for people who would buy MPLX using sites to see who invested in them, what else they invested in. I can't find another MPLX. It's my largest equity allocation. And to me, it looks just about perfect. Nothing's perfect. But in any case, because of that, CNQ, small allocation. CNQ is an oil and gas production company with very large resources in Western Canada, which is what I like the most, and also around the world, including South Africa and the North Sea. Again, a small allocation, and we put it in my IRA. And the reason it's in my IRA is because I'm a U.S. citizen and I'm resident, and Canada taxes U.S. residents on 50%, adds a 15% withholding tax, which is almost impossible to get back. So I didn't want to pay double tax, pay tax on the withholding, pay tax on everything. I'd rather have an IRA where I pay the initial 15%, which is okay, given the reasons I'm going to tell you. I like CNQ, and then let it build up and compound for a while, as I expected to do. So to avoid the withholding tax, I keep it in a qualified account, like an IRA. So what I do like about CNQ is, one, a 5.4% dividend yield, which is pretty high these days. It's hard in what I believe is a safe investment. According to E-Trade, which I'm not sure of this, I didn't have a chance to check, but I know they have good cash flow, but it said their cash flow was 5.3. And a lot of times E-Trade is matched by other investment houses. And that's an 18% cash flow yield. It also has low debt to over assets ratio of 0.22. So it's very solid. And the thing I like a lot about Canadian oil companies in the West, particularly, is there are new pipelines being developed, which run from to the Pacific. And Asia is energy hungry and will be for decades, very likely. So that's going to increase the value and the prices for Canadian oil anyway, relative to U.S. oil and gas. So natural gas liquids, oil, Asia probably will not have enough in our lifetime to support their growth. And so CNQ is a long-term investment with compounding and a good dividend. It belongs in an IRA, I believe, much more than anything else I can find just about. And but we'll stay with our large allocation to MPLX. So we get to the panel question of the week. And Nick can come on. Hey, Nick.
Hello.
So the question is, how important is the real truth? And not this is the truth, the real truth. And we're going to get into the background first. So, and as we always do, and then we'll discuss it. So now that we're in the information age, it has sometimes become very difficult to devise what the real truth is. I wasn't even thinking of Mia, and the fact that she has 168,000 followers. Yeah, that could fool you too. But the real truth and the need for the real truth applies especially to investment, but also to politics and to your personal philosophies. In terms of investing, we just discussed how the media often is off with their record highs, but they have incentives to tell you that. If they say, oh, record highs, everybody should be looking at our show because it's great to be in the stock market. And it's not bad to be, but the point is they have incentives to not present the whole picture as the real truth. In terms of politics, it's even clearer. Look, the right-wing media definitely tells much more of the truth than the left-wing media, which is almost all the media. But they go too far a lot of times too, depending on the show, depending on the thing. Another point is a lot of people mix up the night shows, for instance, on Fox, which is not at all news. So I'm not talking about that. If you look at the night shows, starting at whatever, 5, 6 o'clock, they say their opinions. Those are opinion shows. And people say, oh, I hate some liberals, friends. I hate Fox News. And by the way, that's not my favorite either, but I watch that for some of the real truth, as well as I read the Post, I read Newsmax, and then I look at liberal sources to contrast. But the left media is so bad. Walter Cronkite, they lean left even back then, but they would flip out if they looked at the ethics now of the media. It's like, say anything as long as it hurts Trump, and don't say anything that would help Trump. They will avoid every story and twist every story. So, and unfortunately, the Democratic Party, and we need a viable second party in the United States, is hurting themselves greatly by moving further left. Even moderate Democrats would say, why are you supporting these things? But the media feeds the Democratic Party moving left, and they avoid the real truth. And that's another thing. The Democratic Party has lost the importance of the real truth, and they won't rebuild until they start saying, we need to be truthful about everything. So just a few examples, saying Trump was a Russian surrogate for years. How could a party say that in the information age and believe that it will always last? Now it's coming out, they're getting caught on that, and how it developed too, which is, a scandal. Now they were telling us Biden is physically and mentally fit. Well, maybe that would work in the 1800s, but people have TVs now, and you could just turn on the TV or watch a debate and say, wait a minute, what do you mean you never suspected any issues, and you never raised it for years? And it just goes on daily and weekly. I could almost do a show every week and I had so many things that they said this week that were wrong. Just a couple more. The Epstein story all of a sudden became the most important story in the universe. It's like you'll watch MSNBC reporting for a half hour straight on the Epstein story, and CNN was massive coverage. Well, a few points, the real truth. Epstein died 4 years ago. He had lots and lots of Democratic friends, including Katie Couric, by the way, who was associating with him. And Trump threw Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago in 2007 when he made a pass at a young woman. And this is not reported by MSNBC, CNN, I doubt by the New York Times or whatever. And Trump has had very little or nothing to do with him. And hundreds of people had a lot to do with him because he was an influencer. So that's the truth there. And then the last one I'll cover then again is the cancellation of the Colbert Show. Many people are saying Trump caused the cancellation of the Colbert Show. Well, maybe it had to do with something. CBS is extremely cash short now. They are having real cash flow issues because of lower viewership. And the show was their least profitable. No, let me rephrase. Their biggest loser by far. They were losing $40 million last year on that show. It cost $100 million to produce. That was the most expensive show they had. And it's a talk show. So they might have just said, wait a minute, we're spending $100 million. Colbert himself is getting $20 million, and I doubt he'll take $1 off his salary. Maybe it wasn't the truth wasn't exactly that Trump did the whole thing. I mean, like they would listen to him anyway, since basically they wouldn't listen to him at all about almost anything. So it's the last, I said the last, but the last thing is what's coming out now about how President Obama unbelievably rejected a report that said Russia had no collusion, no effect on the election, and immediately sent the intelligence community back. And I have quotes, which I'll say maybe some other time, about how they said foreign adversaries do not use cyber attacks on election infrastructure, that there was absolutely no influence. So Nick, whether it's your personal life or investment or politics, how important is the real truth?
Well, you do need to know what's real, what's Memorex. The latest thing I looked on the internet was Melania flew in an airplane back to the U.S. from Scotland and filed for divorce. Okay.
Oh, really?
Well, it's on the internet, so I have to go fact check it, and of course, there's nothing supporting it. But see, this goes on all the time. In other words, you'll see something on the internet, and it may not be even close to the truth. Now, why does it affect you in investing? Well, Peter, we know it's extremely important because it makes a difference in your financial life to know about where the markets are going, what the national debt really is, what Congress is doing about it, which lately I heard was nothing. And when we run financial projections, which we do over 10 years for all of our clients, we now go to year 7 and let them know that, well, Medicare is bust and your Social Security check just dropped 24% because under the current state of law, that's what happens. And people don't like to hear about it, but they do need to know about it. What?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Two
things will happen in 7 years from now. Your Medicare will be gone because the trust fund runs out of money, and your Social Security check will be cut 24%. Not because Social Security run out of money, but that is basically all they can support, 24% decrease. Congress right here, and we check every week to see what they're doing about it. They're doing nothing. So,
well, a few corrections I have to. I mean, fundamentally, you're right. I mean, number one, Medicare, I don't think it will ever run out because the problem is the government will do what they need to do, which is print money. But the problem then is, what does that do to the financial markets? And this is why we have a roughly 3%, 2 to 3% allocation in gold as a hedge. And also, it's going, if you have more inflation in an environment where the economy can't grow as much, what it leads to is stagflation. So printing money, increasing inflation hurts consumers who don't have as much money to spend, and it creates negative cycles. So it's going to be a tough market. Again, 50 years of piling up, and Social Security, who knows what they'll do with. They could means test it, and in which case they may say, oh, if you're making a certain amount, they'll take it away, which would be really unfair because to people who they promised Social Security to and have been paying all their lives. But there's no easy solutions on Medicare and Social Security. You can take dents, and the only answer is to grow the economy out of the problem, which will help a lot. And a lot of the current policies of stimulating U.S. energy production, making money on tariffs, moving manufacturing back, could help a lot. I mean, and maybe it'll solve the problem. It's hard to forecast out 10 years, but it's such a unfathomable numbers that it's hard to say if they can be dealt with. So at least minimally you have uncertainty, which you have to factor into your financial planning and in terms of your investments. So that's, again, why we go with the safest investments and energy in one. And energy does well with inflation. Pipelines particularly do well because they get inflation adjustments. So you want a balanced, diversified approach on one side, but generating income isn't bad either because let's say you have some income. At least you can reinvest it if rates go up. So, or if, dividend yields go up because there's more inflation. So look, the bottom lines are the following. One, the real truth matters. And in your personal life, if you tell the truth all the time, which is my personal philosophy, then people learn that you always tell the truth and they learn to trust you, and you learn to trust yourself too. So your word becomes more powerful. And I'm a big believer in that. Philosophically, the Democratic Party has better start focusing on the truth. We cannot be a one-party country. And the truth is, first of all, that these socialists have no idea at all about history. There's never been successful socialism and communism in the history of mankind. And there's been tried hundreds of times. So it's not hard to find the truth on some issues, but you have to face it, like Ray Dalio said. So that's about it. And the same thing goes for the media, by the way. They'll just keep falling and falling as people realize, wait a minute, what have they been telling me? I can't trust them anymore. So that is the foundation for life and media and politics and investing. Tell the truth. Thanks for watching Wall Street Hackers. We'll see you next Tuesday around 6 o'clock for Lawyer's Den Eastern Time, and then starting at 6:15 roughly for Wall Street Hackers. As Kim always says, get healthy and get wealthy. See you soon.
Bye-bye.